The Cold War. Introduction. Even before World War II came to an end, the Allies were preparing for peace. In April 1945, delegates from 50 nations met in San Francisco to establish a new organization called the United Nations, UN. The UN was founded to preserve world peace by promoting international cooperation. A generation earlier, the United States had refused to participate in the League of Nations after World War I. This time, America's response was quite different. The United States not only joined the UN, but also gave it a home. Since 1952, the UN's headquarters had been located in New York City. Hopes for a more peaceful world, however, faded quickly as the United States and the Soviet Union emerged from World War II as bitter rivals. This rivalry led to the Cold War, an intense competition for global power and influence that lasted more than 40 years. I just read section one. Write your key idea on your scrap paper. Section two. The Cold War began in 1945 as the dictator of the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin, seized control of several Eastern European nations. The people in these nations were denied the freedom to choose their own governments, to travel, and even to speak freely. Stalin's takeover of these countries alarmed leaders in the United States and Western Europe. Former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill warned that an iron curtain has descended across the continent. In the view of Western democracies, that iron curtain divided the free world from the West from the Soviet-dominated world of the East. In this chapter, you will learn why and how the United States and the Soviet Union waged their Cold War without ever actually fighting each other directly. As you read, think about how the Cold War resembled a game, a deadly game that threatened to destroy the world. I just finished reading section two. Write key idea two. Section three, choosing sides, a bipolar world. After World War II, the once mighty nations of Japan, Germany, and Great Britain lay in ruins. Only two nations came out of the war strong enough to dominate world affairs. These superpowers were the United States and the Soviet Union. The ideals and ambitions of the two superpowers were as opposite as the North and South poles. Their rivalry created a bipolar world, a world deeply divided into two warring camps. I finished reading section three. Update your key idea three. Section four, the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was born out of the Russian Revolution in 1917. That year, revolutionaries known as the Bolsheviks overthrew the Russian government and later killed Russia's royal family. The Bolsheviks were inspired by the writings of a German philosopher named Karl Marx. In his Communist Manifesto, written in 1948, Marx called on the workers of the world to unite and overthrow the capitalist economic system. Under capitalism, farms, businesses are privately owned by individuals with money or capital. According to Marx, wealthy capitalists take advantage of the labor workers to enrich themselves. I just read key idea five. Write your key idea now on your scrap paper. Section six. Marx claims that the future belonged to an economic system he called communism. Under communism, workers would own all the farms and businesses and run them for the benefit of everyone. The result, Marx predicted, would be a workers' paradise. The Bolsheviks called the ruling councils of workers Soviets. But in the new Soviet Union, power was concentrated in the central government rather than in committees of workers. When Joseph Stalin took over the government in the 1920s, he was determined to transform the Soviet Union from a backwards rural nation to a modern industrial giant. Stalin stamped out all the individual ownership of farms and businesses. The government took over all the economic planning. The Soviet people were forced to work for government-run farms and factories. I just finished the section. Write your key idea. Section 6. To protect his power, Stalin turned the Soviet Union into a vast police state. No one was safe from the prying eyes and ears of Stalin's spies and secret police. Enemies of the people, those suspected of opposing Stalin, were ruthlessly eliminated, which means killed. During the 1930s, between 3 and 8 million people were executed or killed in the Soviet Union. Millions more were imprisoned in labor camps. Instead of a workers' paradise, the Soviet Union became a brutal dictatorship. I just finished reading that section. Write your key idea. Next section. Containing communism. Most Americans were appalled by what is happening in the Soviet Union. They saw communism as a cruel system that took away people's property and denied them basic rights such as freedom of speech and religion. The Soviet government was doing all it could to spread communism to other countries. Americans saw Stalin's takeover of Eastern Europe as proof that he intended to convert the whole world to communism. President Truman responded to this threat with a foreign policy known as containment. The goal of this policy was to keep communism from spreading any further by containing or limiting it to the other countries where it had already taken hold. Truman first turned his attention to Europe, where World War II had left many people homeless and hungry. George Marshall, Truman's Secretary of State, developed a plan to help Europe recover from the war. Under the Marshall Plan, the United States sent vast amounts of money to 16 nations in Europe for rebuilding cities, railroads, factories, and electronic systems. As life in these countries improved, the appeal of communism weakened. Both Americans and Europeans hailed the Marshall Plan as a success. I just finished reading that section. Write your key idea. Next section. The effort to contain communism suffered a major setback in 1949, when communist revolutionaries seized control of China, the world's most populous nation. With the success of this revolution, nearly 1 billion people came under communist rule. I just finished reading that small section. Write a quick key idea. Next section. The Third World. The Cold War created a new set of divisions in the world. The United States and its democratic, industrialized allies came known as the First World nations. The Soviet Union and its communist allies were seen as Second World. There was also a third world of power, of poorer, less developed nations in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Many of these countries only had recently gained their independence from colonial rulers. Both the United States and the Soviet Union tried to convince these nations to join their team in the Cold War. But many third world countries, such as India, remained non-aligned nations, countries that refused to line up with either side. I just finished reading the text. Write your final key idea. Now that you have written all your key ideas, you need to write your central idea. Your central idea should be at least 3 sentences and no more than 6 sentences. Make sure you also include the topic of the text of what it is mostly about. Hint, look at the title. When you are done writing your central idea, you are answering 3 questions. I'm going to read those questions now. Your job is to identify the question type and the strategy and use the strategy on your scrap paper. Question 1. Each detail should be included in a central idea of the article, except A. This rivalry led to the Cold War, an intense competition for global power and influence that lasted more than 40 years. B. The Cold War began in 1945 as the dictator of the Soviet Union, Joseph Stalin, seized control over several European nations. C. But many third world countries, such as India, remained non-aligned nations, countries that refused to line up with either side. D. The Cold War created a new set of divisions in the world. The United States and its democratic industrialized allies became known as the First World Nations. The Soviet Union and its communist allies were seen as the Second World. Question 2. How does Section 1 contrast with Section 9? A. Section 1 describes how the U.S. bombed the Soviet Union, and Section 9 describes the effect of radiation on people in the Soviet Union. B. Section 1 describes the benefits of capitalism, and Section 9 describes the drawbacks of capitalism. C. Section 1 describes the benefits of communism. Section 9 describes the drawbacks of communism. D. Section 1 describes the conditions that began the Cold War, while Section 9 describes the effect of the Cold War. Question 3. Based on its use in Section 7, which is most likely the meaning of the word appalled? A. Pleased. B. Bothered. C. Abused. D. Angered. Make sure you identify the question type and use the correct strategy to answer these multiple choice questions. Goodbye.